HOA raised my fees over too many cars, unaware I own the entire neighborhood. Subscribe, right where you are watching from, and share this video. A tight bundle of worry twisted in my stomach as I pulled into the driveway of my freshly purchased home. My hands gripped the steering wheel firmly before I forced myself to let out a slow breath. This place was supposed to be my escape, a fresh beginning. So why did it already feel like the neat little houses around me were closing in? My sleek, jet-black SUV purred quietly as I shut off the engine. I sat for a moment, staring through the windshield at the flawless lawns and identical houses lined up like toy models. Everything was neat. Too neat. It felt staged, too perfect to be real. Was this truly the peace I had been searching for? I ran a hand over my face before finally pushing the car door open. My heart thumped, a ridiculous reaction, but I couldn't shake it. I had built an empire from scratch, battled ruthless competitors, closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. And yet, standing here, in this quiet little neighborhood, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. To the world, I was just Jake Holloway, an average man in his 40s, another homeowner looking for a calm life. But those who knew me understood the truth. I was a giant in the real estate industry, a powerhouse who had conquered the market with unshakable determination. None of that mattered here. Here, I just wanted to blend in, to disappear, to be left alone. The thought should have been comforting, but the unease gnawed at me. Something moved in the corner of my eye. Across the street, a curtain shifted. A woman on her porch stood with her arms crossed, watching me, her lips pressed into a thin line. More figures lurked behind windows, hidden but observing. I swallowed hard and gave a polite nod in their direction. I had expected some curiosity, but this felt like something else. It was as if they were waiting for something. The illusion of quiet broke before I could make sense of the feeling. "Excuse me, sir. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories." A sharp voice cut through the calm morning air, sending a jolt through me. I turned just in time to see a woman striding toward me, her steps firm, her expression unreadable. A clipboard was clutched tightly in her hands like a weapon she had wielded many times before. I barely had time to brace myself before she was standing in front of me. Karen Whitmore, HOA president, the self-proclaimed ruler of this suburban empire. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral. I had dealt with people like her before, small-time dictators who thrived on controlling others. But I had come here for peace, not war. She gave a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Holloway, I assume?" I gave a slow nod. "That's me. I expected you yesterday," she said, flipping open her clipboard. "Your moving truck caused quite a disturbance." A flicker of annoyance rose in my chest, but I buried it beneath a mask of calm. "Did it?" "Yes," she said primly, scanning her notes. "It blocked the street for over 3 hours. That's a violation. We have rules." I exhaled slowly. Didn't realize. Her lips pressed together, as if she had expected me to argue, or maybe even apologize. When neither happened, she continued. "Either way, you need to get familiar with our community guidelines. We have a standard to uphold." I nodded, unwilling to engage in her game. Karen Whitmore was exactly like the people I had encountered throughout my career, those who found joy in rules and bureaucracy, using them as tools for control. Her gaze flicked toward my driveway, eyes narrowing. "You own multiple vehicles." I followed her stare to my cars, my SUV, a classic Mustang I had restored with my own hands, and a pickup for my occasional projects. I already knew where this was going. "We have rules about excessive vehicles," she said, tapping her clipboard. 3 is excessive. A slow, dull ache formed behind my eyes. I breathed in deeply, steadying myself. "I see." Karen's sharp eyes studied me, searching for defiance, frustration, anything she could use. But I gave her nothing. "I'll have to issue a fine," she announced, a flicker of satisfaction creeping into her voice. $50 per violation per week. Expect an official notice soon. I nearly laughed. $50. It was almost funny. I could buy this entire neighborhood twice over and still have money left to waste. But I hadn't come here to flex my wealth. I had come here to disappear. So instead of arguing, I simply nodded. Noted. Karen hesitated. I caught it, that moment when someone realizes they're not getting the reaction they expected, that they're not as in control as they thought. It passed quickly, but I saw it. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "I'll be keeping an eye on things. We run a structured community, Mr. Holloway, and I trust you'll follow the rules." A slow, measured smile crept onto my face. "Of course, Ms. Whitmore." I watched Karen Whitmore stride away, clipboard clutched tightly, her heels clicking against the pavement like the drumbeat of a self-appointed queen marching through her kingdom. I stood on my driveway for a moment, exhaling a slow breath. I had expected resistance to my presence, but I hadn't anticipated this level of micromanagement. It wasn't just about me, there was something deeper at play. I had dealt with people like Karen before, individuals who derived their power not from real authority, but from their ability to manipulate others into submission. She was the kind who used bylaws like weapons and fear as her currency. I turned my gaze to the houses around me. Some curtains twitched back into place. A few neighbors who had been lingering outside quickly found reasons to go back into their homes. It was clear, Karen had this entire neighborhood under her thumb. I needed to find out just how deep her influence ran. And more importantly, I needed to figure out the best way to dismantle it. The next morning, I decided to get a better lay of the land. I took a walk through the neighborhood, nodding at the few people who dared to meet my eyes. A man in his 50s, dressed in a polo and khakis, was trimming his hedges with meticulous care. As I passed, the man glanced around as if checking to see if anyone was watching before speaking in a hushed voice. "New guy, huh?" I stopped. "Yeah, Jake Holloway." The man wiped his forehead. "Dave Carter. Been here 6 years." I motioned to the neatly manicured lawn. "Impressive work." Dave let out a low chuckle. "Not by choice. Karen does weekly inspections. If my grass is more than 2.5 inches, I get a warning. Second warning comes with a fine." I raised an eyebrow. "You're joking." Dave shook his head. "Wish I was." Another voice chimed in from the driveway across the street. "And don't even think about holiday decorations." I turned to see a woman with short auburn hair, standing with her arms crossed. She had the weary look of someone who had fought battles she knew she wouldn't win. "Lisa Grant," she introduced herself. "I live across the cul-de-sac." I frowned. "Holiday decorations?" Lisa nodded. "Karen has strict rules. No decorations before December 15th. Everything must be taken down by January 2nd. If you don't comply, she fines you. Last year, my son put up a simple string of lights on December 10th, and we got slapped with a $100 violation." I felt my irritation growing. "That's ridiculous." Lisa let out a hollow laugh. "That's Karen." Dave lowered his voice. "She's got the HOA board wrapped around her finger. No one challenges her because, well, they don't want their lives made miserable." I studied them both. "Has anyone ever tried to push back?" Lisa sighed. "A few have. They either moved out or got bled dry with fines. Some just got sick of the harassment. She'll nitpick everything, mailboxes, fence paint, how many guests you have over. She's relentless." I took that in. I had spent my career dealing with ruthless businessmen, power-hungry CEOs who crushed their competition without remorse. Karen Whitmore was no different, except her empire was a suburban neighborhood, and her boardroom was the HOA meeting hall. I needed to see her in action. That evening, I attended my first HOA meeting. It was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, a pristine building that looked more like a corporate headquarters than a community center. The room was packed. Most people sat stiffly in their seats, eyes trained on the woman at the front of the room, Karen. She stood with perfect posture, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk surveying its territory. "Let's begin," she announced. First order of business, lawn inspections. Several properties were found in violation of height regulations this week. Notices will be sent. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but no one dared to speak up. "Next," Karen continued, "there have been multiple reports of excessive vehicles in driveways. As a reminder, no household may have more than 2 vehicles parked outside at any given time. Additional cars must be kept in the garage or removed." I leaned back in my chair, waiting. "Finally, I'd like to address the upcoming holiday season," Karen said. "Decorations will only be permitted starting December 15th. Any premature displays will result in a fine." A man in the back cleared his throat. "Karen, don't you think these rules are a little much?" Karen's gaze snapped to him. "Steve, we've been over this. Rules maintain order. Without them, this neighborhood would fall into chaos." My lips twitched. "Chaos? Over holiday decorations and lawn height?" Karen continued, "This community thrives because we hold each other accountable. If you don't like it, you are free to move elsewhere." Silence settled over the room. That was it, her control. Fear. No one wanted to be her next target. I met her gaze. "Who enforces these rules?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "The HOA board votes on all guidelines." I smirked. "Votes? or just agrees with whatever you put in front of them. A few heads turned. Karen straightened her shoulders. We work as a collective. The board exists to ensure fairness. I nodded. Interesting. I'd love to see the records of those votes. Just to make sure things are as democratic as you claim. The room tensed. Karen's fingers tightened around her clipboard. HOA records are private. I leaned forward. Not entirely. State law requires financial transparency for any HOA board. I imagine the meeting minutes would also be available under the right request. Karen's face darkened. She was smart enough to know I wasn't bluffing. We follow all regulations, she said tightly. If you have concerns, you're welcome to submit them in writing. I smiled. Oh, I will. I returned home and got to work. I started collecting evidence, HOA regulations, state laws, past violations. I spoke with neighbors, gathering stories of Karen's overreach. Then I made calls. Powerful calls. I had connections in real estate law, people who specialized in dismantling HOA tyranny. And most importantly, I had money, a lot of it. Karen had spent years ruling this neighborhood with an iron fist. I was about to remind her what happened when someone played power games against the wrong opponent. And this was just the beginning. Wanting to see what would happen next? Why not subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories? Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. I spent the next few days laying the groundwork. If I was going to dismantle Karen's stranglehold on this neighborhood, I had to do it right. No half measures, no loose ends. I spoke with my legal team, gathering the necessary paperwork, ensuring every document was airtight. Every HOA policy, every financial report, every board meeting record, I wanted them all. And then there was the reveal. I had already set the trap. Now, I just had to wait for Karen to walk into it. The next community meeting was scheduled for Friday evening at the clubhouse. I arrived early, taking a seat near the back, observing as neighbors shuffled in. They came with the usual look, resignation, exhaustion, that weary acceptance that they were here to endure whatever Karen dictated. Karen herself arrived precisely on time, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp. She scanned the room like a warden surveying her prisoners before taking her place at the front of the room. Let's begin, she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. We have several issues to address. I leaned back, waiting. First, Karen continued, I've received multiple complaints about a particular residence violating our vehicle regulations. Eyes flickered in my direction, though no one dared turn their head fully. Mr. Holloway, she said, locking onto me. I believe you were already warned. I didn't move. You believe correctly. Karen narrowed her eyes. Then you also understand that continued violations will result in compounding fines. At this rate, you'll owe quite a bit. I tilted my head. I see. Karen's lips pursed. Do you intend to comply? A slow smile spread across my face. Actually, I'd like to address that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's eyes flickered with something, annoyance, curiosity, maybe even the smallest shred of unease. But she quickly masked it. This meeting is for community matters, she said. If you have a complaint, Mr. Holloway, you can file it in writing like everyone else. Oh, this isn't a complaint, I said smoothly. This is clarification. Karen straightened, feigning indifference. Clarification? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, setting it on my lap. I let it sit there for a moment, watching her reaction. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. A slight frown formed on her lips. Since we're discussing regulations, I think it's time we talk about ownership, I continued. Specifically, the ownership of this neighborhood. Silence settled over the room. Even the usual rustling of papers and shifting of chairs stopped. Karen folded her arms. This community is run by the HOA, Mr. Holloway. Ownership of individual properties does not exempt anyone from following our guidelines. I chuckled. You're absolutely right, Karen. The HOA is responsible for upholding regulations. But there's something you, and maybe the rest of the community, may not know. I opened the folder, pulled out a stack of documents, and stood. I own this neighborhood. The room gasped. Karen's expression flickered, but she caught herself, her features hardening. That's ridiculous. I stepped forward, setting the documents down on the table at the front of the room. These are the property records. Every lot in this development, every street, every green space. They all belong to a holding company. And guess what? I flipped to another page and tapped it with my finger. I own that holding company. A murmur swept through the crowd. Karen's grip tightened on her clipboard. Even if that were true, the HOA bylaws still stand. You can't simply rewrite them. Oh, but I can, I said, enjoying the moment. Because as the owner of the land, I have the power to dissolve this HOA altogether. Gasps erupted. People turned to one another, whispering wide-eyed. Karen's mask of control cracked for the first time. You're bluffing. I smiled. Would you like to test that theory? I watched as Karen's grip on her clipboard tightened, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, slowly, her lips curled into a smirk. Would I like to test that theory? She repeated, her voice dangerously smooth. Oh, Mr. Holloway, you really should have done your homework. She reached into her leather portfolio and pulled out her own stack of documents, thicker than mine, bound neatly in a way that told me she had been preparing for this moment far longer than I had. She didn't just have an answer, she had a plan. The room was silent as she placed her documents next to mine on the table, her fingers tapping the top page. She didn't rush. She wanted the suspense to build. I narrowed my eyes. What is this? Karen clasped her hands together, the picture of controlled satisfaction. You say you own this neighborhood? She tapped the topmost document. Well, Jake, you do own the lots and the properties. Congratulations. A murmur swept through the room. People looked between us, unsure of what was happening. But, she continued, drawing the word out with exaggerated patience, there's something you overlooked. I frowned. Which is? She turned the document around so I could see it. You've been leasing the land from me this entire time. I felt my stomach drop. Karen took her time flipping through the documents. This holding company you so proudly own? It made a very lucrative real estate deal 10 years ago. A deal that, I'm guessing, you never thought twice about. I scanned the page, my brain racing. And then I saw it. A clause, buried deep in a real estate contract from over a decade ago, back when my company had been in rapid expansion mode. It outlined the ownership of the land beneath this entire development. Not the houses. Not the lots. The land. Karen straightened her posture, her smile widening as she delivered the killing blow. It was my family's property before your developers touched it. And instead of selling it outright, we structured a lease agreement, one that was built into the HOA charter itself. I stared at the document, my mind working at lightning speed. This isn't possible. Oh, it's very possible, she countered. And the best part? That lease includes specific clauses about regulatory control. I swallowed hard. Which means? Karen leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to twist the knife. It means that despite all your grandstanding, despite your big reveal, you're still bound by HOA rules, Jake. She tapped the paper again. My rules. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Even those who had just moments ago cheered for my takeover were frozen, their expressions shifting from relief to confusion. Lisa finally found her voice. Wait, you're saying Jake still has to follow the HOA? Karen gave a satisfied nod. Not just follow it, pay for it. Because, you see, since he technically occupies land still under lease, that means he also owes fees to the HOA. Dave let out a low whistle. You're kidding me. I ran a hand over my face, forcing my expression into neutrality. And what kind of fees are we talking about? Karen picked up her clipboard and flipped through a few pages before reading aloud. A total of $50,000 in backdated penalties, plus interest. Oh, and let's not forget the ongoing charges which, oh dear, look at that. She feigned surprise as she scanned the paper. You've racked up additional violations in just your short time here. A few chuckles scattered across the room. I gritted my teeth. So let me get this straight, I said carefully. You let me walk in here, thinking I was about to destroy your entire operation, when in reality, you were just waiting to drop this on me? Karen tilted her head. I knew you'd figure it out eventually. I just thought it'd be a lot more fun if I let you dig your own grave first. I exhaled slowly. You played the long game. Her smirk deepened. Oh, Jake. I own the game. The room burst into whispers. The tension in the air was thick, everyone waiting for my next move. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I locked eyes with Karen. You really think this is checkmate? Karen raised an eyebrow. I don't think it is, Jake. I know it is. I glanced at the documents again. This was a setback, a major one, but I wasn't out. There was always a loophole, always a way to turn the tables. Karen might have thought she won. But the game wasn't over yet. I just needed to find my next move. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting subsequent interesting daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. I stared at the document, my mind working at lightning speed. Karen might have thought she had won, but she underestimated me. There was always a loophole. I spent the next few days diving deep into the lease agreement, consulting with my legal team, searching for anything that could break Karen's grip on this neighborhood. My attorneys pored over every clause, every amendment, every minor revision made over the years. If Karen had played the long game, I was about to rewrite the rules altogether. Word spread quickly. My neighbors, who had initially celebrated my supposed takeover, were furious when they realized Karen was still in charge. The resentment toward her had been building for years, and now, with the possibility of an actual change slipping through their fingers, they were ready to fight. Lisa and Dave organized a petition, gathering signatures from residents who had been fined, harassed, or manipulated by Karen's HOA policies. Stories began pouring in: unjust violations, absurd penalties, targeted enforcement. People had been forced to repaint their fences for minor scuffs, threatened with legal action over mailbox colors, even fined for having too many guests park in their driveways. The list was endless. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere was electric. The usual tension had evolved into open hostility. Lisa stood up first. "Karen, we have over 100 signed complaints about your abuse of power. You've been using the HOA as your personal empire, and we're done with it." Karen, seated at the head of the table, barely blinked. "Lisa, the HOA exists to maintain community standards. If you all followed the rules, there wouldn't be a problem." "The problem," Dave interjected, "is that your rules are unreasonable and selectively enforced. We've spoken to legal counsel, and if we can prove harassment, you can be sued personally." Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. "I took my chance. I've been working with my legal team, and we will find a way to take control of this HOA. One way or another, your reign is ending." Karen leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Oh, Jake, you're really making this more difficult than it needs to be." I ignored her condescension. "You have two choices. We drag this into a legal battle, tie up the HOA in lawsuits for years, and make sure this neighborhood turns against you entirely, or you step down and sell me the land rights outright." For the first time since I had met her, Karen was silent. The room watched, holding their breath. It was the most obvious move. I had the resources to outlast her, and she knew it. And then she smiled. "You think money is what I want?" she asked softly, shaking her head. "You still don't understand me, Jake. I don't care about a buyout. What I want is control." A chill ran through me. Karen sat back in her chair, surveying the room like a queen assessing her court. "Here's my counteroffer. I stay on as HOA president. You, however, get a permanent seat on the board. Every policy change, every fine, every new regulation, we decide them together." Lisa scoffed. "You expect Jake to work with you after everything you've pulled?" Karen shrugged. "What's the alternative? He fights me for years, wastes his fortune on lawsuits, and in the meantime, I still get to enforce the rules. Or," she turned back to me, "we do this the easy way." I clenched my jaw. "You really think I'd accept that?" Karen's smile never wavered. "You don't have a choice. I have legal standing. Your best shot was buying me out, and I just turned that down. Unless you find a legal miracle, you're stuck playing my game. The difference is, now you get a seat at the table." The room was deathly silent. I could see it, my neighbors furious, betrayed by how this was playing out. They wanted Karen gone. They wanted freedom, and I had promised them I'd deliver it. But Karen had flipped the board entirely. She wasn't looking to win outright. She was looking to trap me, to force me into her endless bureaucracy, where I'd have to fight her for every minor rule change. My fists clenched. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. "Think of it this way, Jake," Karen added, her voice light. "Instead of being a powerless homeowner, now you get to be my equal. Isn't that what you wanted?" Lisa muttered under her breath. "Unbelievable." I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. I had two options: reject her offer and let this turn into a legal war that could take years, or accept it and lock myself into a never-ending battle of negotiations and backdoor deals. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll take the seat." Karen's smile widened. "Smart man." And just like that, I had gone from attempting a hostile takeover to being locked in a cold war. Instead of eliminating Karen, I had been forced to become her rival. The war had just begun. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe and like this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to know the country in which you are in, listening to this story. Which country is that? Please comment below.